Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Saddleback webinar this week. My name is Liz Mangus. I'm a literacy specialist with Saddleback Educational Publishing, and this is our final webinar of 2020. So thank you, and thank you for hopping on a little bit early. If you are new here, please locate your control bar for Zoom webinar, which is at the bottom of your web browser window. Here is where you will find two very important icons. The first one is the chat icon. That's what you will use to communicate with your fellow attendees today. If you want to interact, have conversation, please use the chat area, and please be advised as well that there is a little drop-down menu there in the chat. And you want to make sure that you choose all panelists and attendees so that way everybody can see what you've put in the chat. If you don't do that, only a few people at Saddleback will see it, and that's okay too. But we really like to encourage that everybody can see what you have to say, and we just like that spirit of collaboration. The chat area is also where we will be putting links to various resources and handouts today, so be on the lookout for that. Now, the Q&A area is for your questions, either for Saddleback or for our presenter today. If you can remember to put your questions in the Q&A area, we'll get to them a little bit faster. If you put them in the chat, that's okay too. It just might take us a little bit longer to see them. We will get as many questions answered during the webinar today as possible, but many of them will have to wait until the end of the webinar. So please, if you submit a question, please be patient. We'll get started right at 3 o'clock Eastern time. And as usual, we also want to draw your attention to Twitter. Please follow us. And when I say us, I mean Saddleback, and I mean Jody Nolf as well, who is our presenter, and she's fabulous. And I'm sure she would love to connect with you on Twitter as well. So here's the information for Twitter. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Let's check in with Jody and see how she's doing today. How are you today?
I am so excited. I'm very, very excited to present today. So
can you tell everybody where you're joining us from?
I am joining everyone from the 561 in Jupiter, Florida. And we are having beautiful weather here. I am so ready to share some great strategies with everyone. I hope everyone finds them useful. And it's going to be a great session, I can tell.
This is going to be a fabulous session. I've had a sneak peek, and I think you all will be very, very pleased with this information. I see a lot of you are already jumping into the chat box and letting us know where you're joining us from. Keep on doing that. I know Jody's going to prompt us in a few minutes too to tell us where you're from, because we want to know. I saw Emily. I see a lot of folks from Texas joining us today. We have some folks from Canada joining us as well. We have several people from Canada, and we always have some friends from Canada joining us, and it just makes my heart happy. Indiana, all right, South Carolina. So I think, Jody, we're going to have a really good crowd today, which is going to be a great way to close out our fall webinar series here at Saddleback. So since you're in Florida, are you having weather that the rest of us can be totally jealous of right now?
Probably. There's not a cloud in the sky right now. I actually had to put my heat on. I put my heat on for the first time. It was in the upper 30s, low 40s last night. We are in the upper 60s today. It is absolutely beautiful. This is our favorite time of year here. So we're really lucking out with some cooperating weather.
I think those of us in Central or South or Southeast Texas, this is a good time of year here as well, because the summer gets very, very hot. And this year it actually feels, this time of year always feels, I don't know, just somehow more tolerable. So I see in the chat, we have a lot of people joining us from Texas. If you are here from Texas, like Houston, Texas, or San Antonio or Austin, let me know. Am I crazy when I say that this is the best time of year here, and that like summer and spring is just, it's a bit much with the heat? Maybe it's me. I don't know. But I'm just so thrilled to see everybody in this. Summer is the worst. Thank you. I knew it. I knew it wasn't just me. Okay. And New Orleans too. I feel like New Orleans is the same way. Not crazy. Thank you. See, I feel vindicated now. I feel vindicated. People agree. People agree with me. Well, we'll get started in about 1 more minute. So if those of you who are, oh, look, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat. I'm being a I'm being a bad
I know, I'm
facilitator right
seeing
now.
people everywhere. It's so exciting.
This is great. Thank you, everybody. When is everybody starting winter break? Let's get to the important questions. When is winter break? Next week?
Mhm.
Wow. December 18th, this sounds about right for around here. December 18th. Okay. Yeah, Erica, you probably should find out. You owe that to yourself to know when you get some hard-earned time off, for sure. December 23rd, that's kind of pushing it, Charlene. I feel like you should be, adding a few days to that if you can. December 23rd. Ouch. Yeah, I
Wow,
don't
people are
know.
going into that final week.
That seems, oh, it is what it is, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like the 18th is probably the most common. So, well, you know what? Congratulations. Can I say congratulations? You have almost made it through the first half of the year. Fall 2020, a school year like no other. We're almost ready for that mid-year break. This Friday, Celeste, excellent news. That's great. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. It's about time to get started. So today we're going to be talking about supporting secondary content area teachers with ESL strategies. This is, we've done a lot of topics and a lot of webinars here on Saddleback, but this is one I feel like has been a little bit of a gap in our offerings. So we were super excited when Jody agreed to come on and share some thoughts with us about this. Let me tell you a little bit about Jody. I know a lot of your friends are on today, but not everybody knows you. So let me introduce you. So Jody is a full-time ESOL coordinator in a public middle school in Jupiter, Florida. She's a certified ESOL teacher, and she holds a master's degree in education leadership and administration. She has over 20 years of experience as a secondary classroom teacher, teaching language arts and reading to all levels of students. 3 years ago, she transitioned to the world of ESOL, and she coaches and creates professional development for teachers. And we are thrilled, and thank you again, Jody, for being here. I'm going to let you take it from here. You can go ahead and turn on your screen, and we'll go ahead and get started.
All righty, I'm ready to share. I am ready to share. Let's get this started. Okay, can everyone see that? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So as Liz mentioned, I'm from Palm Beach County School District. And today we're going to focus on supporting content area teachers with ESL strategies. And just to give a little bit more background, I came upon this idea because, like many of you, I just didn't know. I just couldn't find the strategies, and I didn't know how to help my content area teachers as a secondary teacher. Everything I looked for was elementary. And we secondary teachers, it's just a little different. Our structure is different. Our classroom structure is different. We have all different planning periods. We hardly see each other throughout the day. And so I really wanted to focus this on secondary. So let's look at our learning objectives for today. Today you will learn ways to plan and provide language support for EL learners while maintaining rigor, because that is still incredibly important. You're going to learn methods to incorporate ESL strategies and scaffolds into content area lessons. And you will also learn strategies to increase engagement and learning outcomes for all learners, regardless of learning environment, whether you are virtual or brick and mortar or hybrid, actually. And I just found this quote to be so indicative of times today. So let's start with a warm up. If you would, in the chat, can you please enter in what has been your greatest success in reaching your ELLs this year? Please respond to everyone. You already told everyone where you're from, but if you want to mention that again, that's great. And I have a second monitor so I can look at the chat, see some of your answers. Oh, personal communication. I love that. Teen moms. Wow. Orally participate, personalize. Oh, the relationships. Oh my gosh, these are such great answers. Data chats. The Zoom sessions. Oh my gosh. And by sharing these, hopefully you're all gathering some ideas from colleagues, and hopefully future friends. I know I am. Relationships. It seems like the bulk of the answers seem to be on the relationship strengthening, which, as we know, is so important. So let's look at something. So I always do this little exercise as kind of an icebreaker. By the way, if you lead PD in your school, this is a great exercise to do with your content area teachers. It's a great eye opener. So I always say that ESL is not translation. And of course, we know that. ESL is about strategies, but let's learn why. So what I have here is a text. It is not in my L1. It's not in my native language. It's in Bosnian. But I'm going to provide a scaffold for all of you. And here, I just went right to Google Translate, and there it is. So for some of you, it might not be in your L1. For me, it's in my heritage language. It is in English. So given that it's translated, I should be fully prepared for a test and assessment because I can read it. Is that correct? We, of course, know that that is not correct, but it's a huge eye opener for teachers. And we always have to remember that just being able to read something and translate is not comprehension. It's not learning. Because if you think about it, if it were only about the ability to read what is on the page, there would be no such thing as intensive reading. We would all have level 5 readers in our classes, and we know that that is not true. Now, I always say translation applications such as Google Translate or the IM Translator, they are not bad, and sometimes they are absolutely necessary. But what I always teach and coach my teachers about is that this cannot be the only strategy. We use it to supplement. We use it when necessary. For example, if we have a newcomer who really just needs to understand the processes or the methods, but to use it as your sole teaching strategy will not work. And so it's a really, really good eye-opening experience for your teachers. So let's see how we start and where we start. We have to start with a plan. Just like any plan experience with a gen ed class, any content area, you have to plan. So when I began this, I thought, I really don't know where to start. So I just decided to go ahead and make my own template, which, by the way, is on my website and my Padlet. So I offer it for all of you to please use and share with your staff. So it's divided into 2 sides for a content area teacher. And in our district, we use a collaborative model. It is not a co-teaching model. Co-teaching, we have 2 teachers of record. In a collaborative model, which we use, by the way, push in. We try not to pull out, we try to push in. Given the virtual situation, we sometimes have to virtually push into classrooms, but it does work. And in this collaborative model, we offer language support. So on the left-hand side, we have the content area teachers' plans. And then on the right-hand side, we have the collaborative teachers' plans. I have highlighted every box that I created, and I will briefly explain some of the reasoning behind some of these boxes. So of course, we always start with our standards. And on the collaborative teacher side, we start with our language objectives. And in this plan, the content area teacher and the ESL support teacher, or ESL, depending upon how your district identifies, they work together to develop strategies to support English language learners, and most importantly, to promote equity in your classrooms. So we have our content area teacher side, and we have our ESL support teacher side, as I mentioned before, but let's really look at these components in depth. So we start with the materials, and then in italics, I said to myself, you know what? I want to keep it really simple. I want to make it palatable for those content area teachers to actually work with this document, which, by the way, can be planned and worked out between 2 teachers in a Google Meet, in a Zoom Meet. It can be shared via a Google Doc. So it does not need to be a brick and mortar experience if you are virtually learning right now. But I need to know, as an ESL support teacher, what materials my content area teacher will be using. And that's what I put in italics. This is what I'm using to teach. The skills of the lesson, any prior knowledge, what the students already understand. Notice I did not word it as what the students have already been taught, because those are two different things. This is what the students have mastered and understand, so that as the ESL support teacher, I can springboard from that knowledge and take it from there in my planning. And you're going to see this in action in just a few minutes. The key vocabulary, the assessment, so that my ESL support teacher understands this is how the students will demonstrate how they understand and have mastered the content. An upcoming lesson, this is also a very good planning tool so that both sides understand this is where we're going. Remember, these planning templates and all about lesson plans and benchmarks and objectives and whatever you decide to call them, they're roadmaps. They define where we are going and they define our endpoint. And of course, at the bottom, we have our ESOL accommodations or our ESL accommodations, however you term it. But very important, notice that those accommodations are on the content area teacher side of the planning template, which for some of your content area teachers might be a little bit of a, oh, I didn't realize that I was responsible for some of that. So when we get those content area teachers who just in all good faith, maybe do not know the strategies or feel that it is the ESL support teacher's sole responsibility to work with that child, here in the document, you can see it is the responsibility of all parties to guarantee those adaptations are made and that the equity is there. So then on the ESL support teacher side, we have the language objective. Materials, this is what I need beforehand. This is what I need from my content area teacher, from my students to make this lesson successful. How I'll offer language support, how I'll connect what the students already understand to the new skills, how I'll explain the words and ideas, my role during the assessment, key ideas needed for the lesson, and then down at the bottom, how I'm providing language support throughout the lesson. So this is not only a plan, it's a communication tool. And so we secondary teachers who really may find our schedules conflicting with our coworkers, colleagues, support staff, this is your communication piece right here. So let's look at this a little bit more in depth. So we have our content area science teacher, and let's plan a lesson. This was an actual lesson from a 7th grade science teacher. And this, just so you know, this is all the left-hand side of the template. So we have our standards. We always start with our standards, just like any other gen ed classroom for any other gen ed student. The materials, we need the e-textbook, we need Starburst candies, and the sweet observations and inference worksheet. And I don't know about you, but you had me at the Starburst candies. I mean, what an engaging piece of material to get students engaged in science. We have the skills. This is what we're doing. If you look over to the middle, we look at the prior knowledge. In my opinion, this is something that I would really hone in on. So I already know that, that the students, they know the 5 senses and that they understand the ideas of difference, record, and data. So as an ESL teacher, I'm going to use that prior knowledge to springboard my lesson. The key vocabulary and concepts: qualitative, quantitative, data, observe, and inference. What I want you to notice is that this is all academic language. We are not watering down content. We are not supplanting any material for our EL students. They all need to know the same academic language and content as all our other students. So what's the difference? The difference is in the scaffolding and the adaptations. So we all want our students to be up here because we really want to raise the bar. That's where the scaffolds come in, and we just layer it differently. So the endpoint can be the same, but the path to getting there is where the difference lies. That's not to say that we don't adjust some goals for students as necessary, but we're talking about the academic content of this lesson. So we have the assessment. And so as an ESL teacher, I understand that they're going to have a test coming up. So this is how I need to prepare them, what I'm going to be doing. Later on, I'm going right into Unit 5. And so that can get me thinking ahead. And then the ESOL accommodations. So notice that the content area teacher will eliminate 2 choices per test item and will reinforce the use of science journals. And then at the bottom, I have a next meeting date if you're able to plan the next meeting. And that is a question that I get a lot. How do we find the time to plan? In the virtual environment, this could be shared. So I would say that if you can meet in person, that could be ideal. But given the age of COVID and what we're going through at the moment, you might just share it as a Google Doc and you could meet virtually. And I have met virtually several times with this teacher and it works beautifully. So let's look at some key ESL strategies that are simple for all teachers. So here is the right side of the template. Notice all that I have highlighted. This is how I, as the ESL support teacher, will support the students in that classroom. Notice my language objective. It's to increase fluency and comprehension of academic language, in this case, in science. I'm letting the teacher know, hey, I need a copy of the worksheet, I need the textbook pages, and I need key terms of the lesson, because in many models, you may not be in that classroom every day. You may be, realistically, you may be pulled out for something, you may be absent a day, you need the communication there. And so that is what this template is designed to do. I will be using small groups. I will be circling words, previewing context, using cognates. I'll show pictures. I will review and point out that total physical response. I will explain the difference. I will use sentence frames and stems. I will determine understanding through pictures. I will ensure that students have their science journals, ensure that heritage language dictionaries are readily available. I will refer to chart paper of key terms as reinforcement. Now, if you are not in the classroom right now, these are very simple adaptations to make in the virtual world. We are using small group with Google Meet breakout rooms, Zoom breakout rooms. Very easy to do your small groups. If you don't have chart paper because you are in a Google Meet, this could be your Jamboard. This is your backdrop. This is your Google slide, your Nearpod slide. Very easy to do, and you can make them even more interactive that way. And how I'm providing language support. I'm using the small groups. I'm focusing on keywords. I'm using the chart paper, and I'm using real world examples. So let's take a look at what these strategies actually look like. So the biggest question I always get is, Jody, how do I know what vocabulary words to teach? There's just so much of it. And I always say, go to your standards, go to your roadmap, look at your objectives. Remember, we are not supplanting information. So start with that, and then we're going to see a video clip of the planning and action. Just a couple of notes before I start it. This was made pre-COVID. So yes, we are side by side. We are not wearing masks. We are not 6 feet apart, but this was filmed before we closed schools. The video replay is a little bit not lagged, but not very smooth. So if you would like to see it fully in action, you can always see it on the website and the Padlet. And I do believe the link will be put into the chat. But the sound, you'll really be able to grasp what this planning sounds like. So let's take a listen. What are some of the key vocabulary words that you need me teaching that day?
For sure, observation and inference.
Okay.
And the qualitative again and quantitative. So those 4 words are really what this activity is focusing on.
Okay.
I found that the difference between observation and inference is hard for them.
Gotcha.
So we need to make sure that we kind of get that going for them so they're able to do this activity.
So what I'm thinking is, because quality and quantity, they already kind of know those stems from the underlining.
Yep.
I'm going to really reinforce the difference. And I'm going to use cognates that at least I know. For example, I know that quanto means how much, so that refers to quantity. So I'm going to use whatever I can cognate wise. I'm also going to determine understanding through a lot of pictures, because I feel like I can't really rely on any native language that I know. And because for my students who might not be Spanish speakers who don't know that.
Right.
So I'm going to use pictures, and what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to have them maybe, like if I have a picture of maybe 5 bananas, I'll have them count for quantity, but then I'm going to have them describe it for the quality, and they could do that through pictures.
Perfect.
I'm going to ask them based upon what they see, what they might think, and that could reinforce the inference.
The inference and the observation.
So for example, if we have like a green banana and a yellow banana and a brown one, based upon what they observe, what can they infer about it? About maybe which one is the most ripe, which one isn't ripe yet. Exactly. So I want to kind of do inference that way through pictures.
So I'm hoping that you gathered the information from these two sides of the template, that both teachers are working together to determine the best way to teach that academic vocabulary. So let's look at a few more strategies and the scaffolds.
Hey, Jody, can I jump in here for just a second? Because we have a couple of what I feel like are burning questions.
Sure.
I'm getting the sense from the chat and the questions that people are loving these templates, and their immediate response is, I don't know if I can make this work because I work with 30 teachers, or if I need to do this for every single lesson, it just seems like a lot. And so I was sort of thinking through that as you were presenting, and in terms of like finding the time or modifying the template to suit a particular teaching situation, what are your thoughts around, would it make sense to modify the template to do units versus lessons, or 2 weeks at a time versus a single lesson at a time? Or is it most beneficial if you can really do it one lesson at a time, and maybe we just meet together for several weeks and get into a routine, and then once we're in a routine with our content teachers, then we can sort of do it like at a distance on a collaborative Google Doc? Or what are your thoughts around that?
I think that's a great question. And when you were speaking, I'm thinking, when I was in the classroom, how would I have preferred, as a content area teacher, how would I have preferred to do it? I think number one, I think every teacher is different, and their preference and time frame is different. So I would say, at least initially, in my opinion, I would do the whole sheet at least for one lesson to start the conversation going with your content area teacher, because to me, I think that helps establish the relationship. But then the next time, we have the time to do that again. We have diagnostics coming up. I have lunch duty. I mean, let's face it, we are all short on time. So I would abbreviate that and say, you know what? I already know what the language objectives are. Here are the materials. We're having a test on it next week. What do you plan to use? And I would say there is no hard, fast rule to say, well, you need to fill in every box to make it effective. To me, it's effective if the kids are learning. So if you say, you know what, we have 5 minutes of a Google Meet, let's just hammer out the details because I have a class starting soon, then that's great. If you say, you know what, we're going to meet as a PLC, which is another idea. We have professional learning communities. So what you might want to do is meet as a grade level, and then everyone can contribute, fill in a piece or two, and then take it by unit. So it doesn't need to necessarily be a hard, fast formula. I think whatever works for your teams, but I would reiterate to at least try to fill in as much as possible from the get-go to get your content area teachers accustomed to the mindset of, I need to work on these strategies as well. I can't just rely on my support staff. It is my responsibility as the content teacher to provide those scaffolds as well. And by having that conversation, your content area teachers might get a little bit more buy-in.
I love that. And we had a couple more people chime in. Thank you, Erica and Stacy, saying that they provide short PDs where teachers can workshop lessons together. And Stacy also said that they gamify PDs through something called a Ludo. I'm not familiar with that, but I'll definitely check it out. And having videos like the one you just showed with the accompanying template and a call to action is another good way to go. So thank you all for your suggestions. And thank you, Jody, for letting me interrupt you so we could address those. I'll let you continue.
No, absolutely. And I love the feedback. I always say, you know, as teachers, we need to be learners. So I love the suggestions and the comments and the feedback. I think it's terrific and helpful. So in our district, we have smart boards. So here is a drag and drop activity. And if you are in a district that does not use smart boards, or if you are just not in that type of environment, this could easily be done in a Google slide. It could be done on paper if that is where you're going. But what I want you to really pay attention to is the word bank at the bottom. Look at the words. It's the academic vocabulary, inferencing, observing, qualitative. So it all goes back to that initial objective. One thing that I always suggest to my content area teachers, and I really do believe in the benefits of it, that after the students fill in, whether it's a fill in the blank, whether it's a drag and drop, have the students write out the entire paragraph. I firmly believe in the importance of that, because here they're plugging in words, but by writing out the sentence, number one, they're practicing their writing skills. Number two, they're understanding the fluidity and the flow of a sentence in English. And it really gets them to practice that writing in English sentence. Then you could take it a step further by having them, if they're ready for it, by having them read it aloud. They could read it in a Google Meet. They could read it into a Flipgrid and record it. So there are many ways to scaffold or to take it to the next level, but I would have them practice the writing. And then of course we have the word walls that show cognates and key vocabulary. Notice there are also visual cues. We have our liter bottle. We have our little ruler to also give further scaffolding, especially for our newcomers. Those pictures and graphics are priceless when it comes to helping all levels of learners. That's where the equity comes in. And you scaffold it very easily by just gradually removing as students master concepts. So for example, if I had a word wall in a brick and mortar classroom, when I was in the classroom, I didn't like taking them down and putting them back up all the time. So what I found easier to do is I would take either poster board or chart paper and just cover it. And then if the next class came in and they needed that word wall, I could just take down that paper and reveal what was already there. So very easy to do. And where the scaffolding is, you adjust as the learners develop their language. And this is what it looks like in the classroom. This is actual, this is an actual exercise. Here is the science teacher. She made a virtual drag and drop. This was not a smart notebook activity. This is a Google slide. All she did was make colorful boxes to increase the engagement, make it very appealing. And she had arrows. And because she copied it into every student's Google Classroom, they had their own drag and drop activity. And her word wall that she just takes down and puts up as necessary. She actually adds and goes around the room as the year develops. And then when the students become more proficient, or honestly, during testing season, when we know we need to cover our walls, she just covers them up. They're always there, generally speaking, they're always there, and she encourages the students to look at it. It's not cheating, it's guiding. We don't give, we guide. These are guides. So let's look at some more. So we have infographics. This was very easy to make. I just color coded the columns. I have the word, notice, academic vocabulary. I'm not changing any of the content for my ELL learners. They are going to receive the same content. I'm just going to scaffold it, and deliver it a little bit differently. I have some definitions and I have some pictures. Sentence frames and stems. I always tell people this is my favorite. So if you have a content area teacher who says, I need one or two, I don't have time, I need something really easy, I go for the sentence frames or the stems. They've always been my go-to. I see, observe. This is blank data, qualitative or quantitative. So I think, in parentheses, infer, and then once the student fills it all out, either a paragraph down or on the other side of the paper, they write out the entire paragraph, and then they're practicing paragraph writing. For my more either intermediate or my more proficient learners, I might remove qualitative or quantitative, or I might just add a few extra choices. But this is another very good scaffold. So we just add or delete word choices in the boxes for, or the frames for varied levels of learners. You just add or take out the information. And for your content area teachers who may feel that that is a lot, it's very simple to do. They just make multiple copies. What I would do as a content area teacher, copy 1 would have everything, and then copy 2, highlight and delete. Save that copy. Copy 3, highlight and delete. Take out whatever I don't want. And so the scaffolds are in place. And I'll explain that a little bit more in depth in another slide. So this is what it looks like in the classroom. Now, this infographic just has the terms because these particular students were able to fill in the rest on their own, although they did work in groups and pairs as that assistance. And here we have our sentence stems. This is actually on her physical whiteboard. It's also present in her virtual classroom. They use Cornell notes. Today we learned about the main idea is, and this is an actual newcomers product. Not everything was answered, but that's okay. This is a newcomer. So those of you who have newcomers who may feel, I'm not sure what to do, the child won't even talk, there will be a period of silence. That doesn't mean that they're not learning. That just means that they need to get a little bit more acclimated. So what do? I always tell teachers, just smile. I know it sounds very simple, but a smile is universal in any language. And if you make that child feel safe and loved and welcomed, that child is going to want to learn. They're kids. They're kids. And so those are tips that I give my content area teachers, especially with the newcomer that may arrive in your classroom Tuesday, February 12th, in the middle of the class. What do? You make the child feel welcome, and that child will learn. So here we have sentence frames. The top one in green was for an animal project that a teacher did. And the teacher actually came to our ESL team one year and said, I'm not sure what to do about the newcomers. I want to make them feel included. I want them to really feel that they can participate. We said, go for a sentence frame. Keep it simple. Focus on the meatiest part of the lesson, what you really want the students to get out of the lesson. How do you know? Look at your benchmark. Look at your final goal. What is it you want the students to learn? And so she made the frame. We said, make sure they write the whole paragraph out. Those newcomers got in front of the entire class and read it aloud. Not that they all will, but that confidence of knowing that they can do it will engage them and motivate them. They're just like any other child. We have the summary, and down at the bottom, this is an actual product from an intermediate learner. This product right here, there are 2 types of variables that change in an experiment. They are called the independent and dependent variable. The independent variable is what I will change, and the dependent variable is what I will measure. This is from an EL student who has been in the United States for under 2 years, but is learning very quickly, doing very well. So we adapt assessments. How do we do that? We can eliminate choices, as we mentioned. We offer alternatives for responding, such as drawing or acting out. We provide word banks, sentence frames, and stems. So here's an example from a 7th grade science test on that based upon the SWEET observations. And so number 1 says an inference is defined as, and then we have choices A, B, C, and D. I eliminated 2. I would most likely do that. I recommend that for newcomers and the entering speakers. For my intermediate learners, I would probably just eliminate 1. And my more advanced and proficient learners, I wouldn't eliminate any. So I would start with all 4 choices, make a copy, highlight 1 choice, delete. Make a copy, highlight another choice, and delete. Then I have 3 versions A, B, and C. And the children will get their copy according to their needs, their language needs. And then as they develop, you know what? They don't need 2 choices eliminated now that we're in maybe February or March. Now they'll get the next version. And that's where the scaffolds are. You're just gradually taking them away as the child doesn't need them anymore. Number 2 says, draw an example of quantitative data. For my more proficient learners, I would probably have them write out a sentence as well. I just gauge the level of my learners and adjust accordingly. That is where the equity comes in. I'm not giving them any answers. I'm just adjusting the level of scaffold according to their needs. And number 3 says fill in the blank. Qualitative data is anything you can blank, such as color, taste, or smell. I have 3 choices. For my newcomers and my entering students, I might just have 2. For my more proficient learners, I might not have any. So it really depends upon the nature of your class, how you're going to scaffold, and you just adjust the number of possible multiple choice answers and word bank choices. And that is something that content area teachers can do very, very quickly. I was going to say easily, but they could do it very, very quickly and easily. This is what it looks like in the classroom. This is one of my favorite slides. This is actual student work. We have adapted assessments. We have student drawings, sentence frames, and fewer response choices. So here down at the bottom, we have an assessment. And if you can see down at the bottom, we only have 2 choices. That is for the entering student. It is still the same material. But look at these. Aren't they great? A summary that was made with a frame, but this is the entire paragraph written out. The child always has to write out the entire sentence or paragraph. But look at these t-shirt designs. In the middle, where it looks like just a sweater that's brightly decorated, it's actually the rock cycle. So instead of them having to write a paragraph or choose words, she actually had them design a sweater showing the rock cycle. This clearly demonstrates understanding. By the way, these are all from newcomers. These are all newcomer students with limited language, but not limited knowledge. They all come with that ability to learn and to thrive and to demonstrate. We just do it a little differently. Isn't that cool? So we have student created resources and visuals. We have the cognate lists that, even though this is not an actual example, you can have the students generate their own cognate lists. Because if they are proficient in L1 or even know a few words, that is something that you could do as a class. How cool is that? They could post it in a Padlet. They could make a Google slide. They can make a Jamboard and design their own cognate lists to share with the class. So as a content area teacher, if you are saying to yourself, I can't do that. I don't speak Spanish, or I don't speak French, or I don't speak another language other than English. You have the kids do it. Isn't that great? Because they know. And it's a great classroom activity that really builds that sense of community and also lets them show off a little bit about themselves. It really lets them show how they can shine.
Jody, that is perfect. Again, I'm interrupting. My
Sure.
apologies, but
No, don't apologize.
I was just going through the chat. Let me turn this on so people can see me. I was just going through the chat, and Dana had posted a question in the chat, and this is really for everybody. So those of you out there listening, if you can answer this, go ahead and type it in the chat. Is there a tool for comparing languages to see cognates in less commonly encountered languages? If there is not a tool, or even if there is a tool, perhaps the thing to do would be to have the students generate the lists as they make those discoveries, and that way you have that relationship and that community building tool. So I wanted to make that connection first and foremost. But then secondly, Dana had posted this comment in the chat, and I don't believe it was to everybody, so not everybody could see it, but I just know this is a great group and somebody's going to have some ideas for Dana, so I wanted to put it out there. So is there like a cognate tool out there that people are relying on? And if there is, just drop in the chat so we know. And that's it. Thanks.
As far as a cognate, something to compare, my first thought, and by the way, the website is available on, the link is available on my website. My immediate thought is Omniglot, OMNIGLOT. I want to say it's omniglot.org. I'm not exactly sure, but I have the link under my favorite links on my Padlet and my website, and it shows more languages and their origins and their alphabet, and it's so fascinating, this website. So I would start with Omniglot. And as far as cognates, there is an extension, the Cognate Highlighter, that will automatically highlight cognates in any text that is before you digitally. And a lot of teachers like that. The only thing that I would mention is that sometimes you want to turn it off. It goes on by default and it's fabulous. I mean, it really is a great tool, but you can go in and toggle back and forth and turn it off if there is an opportunity where you just don't want to use it. So we have the journals. And as you notice, this graphic is our tried and true composition notebook. And some of us are in the digital world. So I can show you what those look like as well. And again, we scaffold these materials, these strategies, by gradually removing the resources and the visual cues for varied levels of learners. And as you remember from the planning template, the ESL teacher and the content area teacher both acknowledged on that template, you know what, we're going to remind the students to have their science journals handy. We're not giving them the information. We're letting them use the tools that they've created. And there might come a time where you say, you know what, we're going to go without the journals today. I don't think you need them for this lesson. You guys, you got this. And so you adjust. You know your kids. That's what's so great about all of these strategies. They can be adjusted. That's the whole point, to adjust them. So this is how they look in the classroom. These are student created journals. These are, I love these. These are all really creative tasks that went into a paper journal. These are the flip pages. And so all of these were drawings that were put into a journal. Colorful, varied. It's not just words. It's not just sentences. It's a whole mixture of skills that really show off what the kids can do. And they're beautiful. So we also have digital journals. This is an interactive notebook. These are very popular nowadays, very easy to do. So here is the science teacher. She has a word bank. They're learning about waves. These were just Google Slides. That's all it was. But because every child gets their own digital interactive notebook dropped into their Google Classroom, these are manipulated. These are the drag and drops and the matching. Very easy to do. She just made shapes, typed in the words, and they were ready to go. Aren't they neat? And colorful and beautiful. So we always model the circling, the underlining, the reviewing, and the highlighting. And the I do, we do, you do, our gradual release of information. This isn't necessarily a specific ESL strategy. these are just really good teaching strategies. And how do we scaffold? Well, we allow our more confident students to work independently or in pairs or groups. And I think it's important to mention this because I don't know about you, but I always had that small handful of students. They nailed it. They had the work done. They were ready to move on. We need to accommodate them as well so that they don't get bored, so that they're engaged and excited and challenged. So those are the students that you push ahead. And that in turn might allow you to conference a little bit more with the students who need the individual attention. Then you circle back to these leader students and you have them teach part of the lesson. You have them engage with the learning. It gives them ownership. It lets them shine just like any other student in that classroom by showing what they can do as well. And I think that is very important to provide equity to all learners. So we have the modeled highlighting. So here we have a paragraph on artificial selection. Very simple. The main idea of the paragraph is highlighted. Very simple reading strategy. But I want to talk about it in terms of English language learners. You think about your objective. You think about your benchmark. What do I really need for them to know? And this is really good to explain to your content area teachers. There's so much text. What do I do with a newcomer when we're analyzing a paragraph, when we're reading 3 pages? You focus on the most important, meatiest bit of information. That is not to say that the rest of this paragraph is not important. I'm just saying that it might not be important right now. It might not be important for today's lesson. For today's lesson, I need them to know what artificial selection is. That's the objective. The students will understand artificial selection. Boom. So you can start with that and then scaffold later on, but focused on the meatiest part. And I'm going to show you this more in depth in another slide. I'm going to explain what I mean about adapting those texts. So in the classroom, we modify those texts. We use the sentence frames, the word banks, and the highlighting. So this I actually did last week. We have a new science teacher to our school. He's not new to science, but he's never taught EL learners before. I love working with those content area teachers. So he is using STEM scopes. So I sat in his classroom and the day's lesson was on erosion and weathering. So in a matter of 10 minutes, I actually went back to my office. And I'm saying that because if you're virtual and you are not actually side by side with your content area teacher, you could do this virtually. In my office, I highlighted the text from the STEM scopes and I dropped it into a Word document. I just put it right into Word. How did I know what text I wanted to use? Because I knew what his objective was. He wasn't focusing on plains and mesas. He was focusing on weathering and erosion. All of those things were part of that unit, but that's not what he was focusing on in that lesson. So I copied it. I added a few extra text features. I highlighted, and I also put in bold some of the academic vocabulary, which could easily be scaffolded, by the way, by taking out those text features if necessary. Then I created a paragraph frame. One thing I learned about weathering, one thing I learned about erosion, and that is what he wanted all of his students to do. They had to write a sentence about weathering, a sentence about erosion, and one other sentence that I just kind of assumed was a sum up sentence. I made a word bank. I emailed it to him. He dropped it right into his Google Classroom. He had the adaptation within 10 minutes that now he can use for other classes. He actually took it further and added a little bit more vocabulary. He knows his students well enough that he said, you know what? They can handle a few extra choices and they could handle the additional challenge. So notice that you adapt the text for that objective. They'll get to the other to the other stuff. They'll get to the other text. But for your struggling learners, or your entering learners, your emerging, your newcomers, whoever, your level ones, focus on what you need for them to learn. And then the rest will come. That's where the scaffolds are. One thing that I do want to mention, and this was just something that we learned, it's just a bit of advice based upon what I've seen. I think a lot of us right now are dealing with the engagement factor. Students not logging on, students struggling. I think it's very hot in the news right now. So my advice is to keep the tech very simple. And you as a content area teacher may say, but I only use 2 platforms. But we're secondary people. Multiply that times 5 or 6 other teachers. And you just need to think about that. So the students might have multiple tabs open, which of course slows down their internet, and it can present a challenge. We have found that when the students are regularly coached in the tech, and the tech is simple enough to use on a regular basis, the students are more apt to engage. So that being said, these 2 pictures, the middle one and the one on the right, the actual work that I copied and adapted, that is all on one document. Therefore, the student did not have to toggle back and forth between the reading and the writing. Everything was on one page. It's just my opinion from what I've seen. If you're having trouble with engagement or kids are struggling with the technology, try to simplify it further, because we've learned they are awesome with their phones and their technology, and they're great with their apps, but we learned that they didn't even know how to copy and paste. And I'm not just talking about EL learners, I'm talking about all of them. So we cannot make these assumptions, and by removing these barriers that we might not even realize are barriers, you might get more engagement. So for those content area teachers who are saying, I don't have time, or this is too much, or I'm just feeling very overwhelmed. If you're feeling overwhelmed, think about how your students are feeling. And you might get more bang for your buck and a better return on that 10-minute investment of an adaptation through more kids getting engaged and responding. Just something that we've learned along the way. So here is an example of a sentence frame for our more proficient learners. We have a graphic of a control variable, independent, dependent, and so forth, regarding water, soil, plants, and light. So here we have a frame. These are, again, this is for more of your proficient learners. There are 2 types of variables that change in an experiment. They are called independent and dependent variable. Although both types of variables change, comma, the independent variable is changed, but the dependent variable is measured. So I have in red more of the conjunctions and the joining words. The sentence structure is a little bit more complex for our more proficient learners. So if you're saying to yourself, yeah, but I have intermediates, what am I going to do about them? Same thing. So here, let's look at some frames for your intermediate, your developing and your expanding. Look, same graphic. They're not going to learn anything different than your other students. The delivery will be different. So here is a frame for a developing student. The light color is an independent variable because it changes. The plant height is a dependent variable because it is measured. They are learning the same material. They're just learning it in a different way. But I have newcomers. Challenging. Well, here you go. We have our entering and emerging, same graphic. They need to learn it as well. It's equity. We cannot deny them that opportunity to learn with the other students. We're just going to change the pathway. I have a sentence frame or a fill-in with a word bank. So we have the independent variable is changed. The dependent variable is measured.
because my goal was for them to understand the difference and to understand what an independent and dependent variable was. And I provided a word bank. I scaffolded it even further, but the information is still there. So another thing that is great fun for kids is Jamboard. Someone turned me on to Jamboard and I am completely hooked. Usually this is a little bit more interactive, but in the interest of time, this is just a graphic, but they're so easy to do. It's a fun, interactive strategy that you could use as an engaging exit ticket. Kids love the sticky notes. They can pick their color, they can move it around. It saves right to your Google Drive. You can make one for each classroom. They are great. You could also use it in PD. You can use sticky notes with Nearpod. You can use them with a multitude of different applications. But I love Jamboard for its simplicity. I believe in the simple aspect of it because I feel you're more likely to get the buy-in. So Jamboard is terrific. So let's connect. I love connecting with people. I am on Twitter at Jody Nolf. My email is jody.nolf@palmbeachschools.org. Here is a link to the website and my Padlet. All of the templates are on there, a wealth of information. My entire Collab Chat video series is on there that I'm always adding to. I'm constantly adding materials. And if there's something specific that you wish that you could see, you just drop me a line and I'll see about getting it on there. Because if you want to see it, chances are there are other teachers out there, other educators who would like to see the same. So it's been such an amazing opportunity today, such an amazing pleasure to talk with you.
The response in the chat is amazing. People are loving this. They found it so helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad.
While you were presenting, a lot of really interesting questions were coming in. So please don't go anywhere because I do want to get some of these questions answered that are still lingering in the Q&A. But before we do that, let's go to, of course, let everybody know what's coming up. So this is the last webinar for our fall series. Our winter webinar series will be starting on January 14th. So be on the lookout for invitations to register for those events and keep an eye on our website as well. We have a lot of great presenters and content coming up, and we're going to try to keep these webinars going for as long as possible because we just love facilitating these conversations. Also, one thing to check out, this is kind of a new thing. We now have an on-demand webinar to introduce our digital solution, our new ebook platform for Saddleback. So if you are interested in possibly taking a look at digital Saddleback high-low books, you want to go ahead and check out this webinar to get the overview. And this one is on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out. And now let's go ahead and get to those questions. The first question I wanted to address is, will the chat box messages be available or shared because there are so many great resources from other attendees? Well, what I'll do is I will pull those resources and links out of the chat and we'll mail them to all of the attendees. So you'll have those. I don't want to send you the entire chat transcript because it's a lot, but I'll pull those out and we'll make sure we get those to you. So thank you for that question. Also, shout out to Faith Foster for posting that Chrome extension for the Cognate highlight browser. We appreciate that so much. That was very helpful. Shout out Cassie Noble for posting the Padlet for virtual word wall. We had someone asking for tools how to do a virtual word wall. So see, this group of teachers here, we're taking care of each other today. So
I love it.
It's awesome. And then where was your question? Hannah, this is the one I wanted to get to from Hannah. So Hannah wanted to know, this type of collaborative teaching that you're describing, what does it look like in the classroom? Are the teachers teaching together? Is the EL support person doing push in or pull out? Does the EL teacher wait and support students as they are working independently? So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
That's a great question. Honestly, it looks very different in a multitude of classrooms. It depends upon the teacher's style and because we are virtual. So let me just give you some examples of what it looks like traditionally and what it's looking like now. So traditionally, we have our push and support teacher going into a classroom,
if the size of the classroom and the amount of ELs is conducive, they try to pull a small group, maybe to a smaller table. Some of our classrooms, quite honestly, they don't support that because these are secondary classrooms. We used to not do these things. So they will just circulate in an area where most of the ELs are. So it's not necessarily pulling them to the side because there was no room to pull them to, but they would circulate within the desks. Now that we are virtual, some of us are going into the rooms. Of course, we are really trying to maintain a very safe distance, but sometimes it's easier said than other times. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying we love being with the kids and we really love that closeness. So we've had to get a little bit creative. Some teachers are doing breakout rooms. When I was supporting one teacher, most of his work is done through Google Docs. Even though I was in the room, I would open up the students' Google Docs and I could sit a safe distance apart. I could really do it from my office if I wanted to. And I could go right into their Google Doc, type them comments, help them see that they were working. So it really depends on the nature of the class. A math class was not like that because the math teacher didn't work in Google Docs because hers was more hands-on, showing the math concepts. So for her EL students, they were having difficulty really understanding division. So I made a video, which is available on my website. I figured, you know what? Let me be able to reach as many kids as possible that they could watch whenever. They don't have to be in the classroom. They don't have to be in class at that particular time. She launched it to her Google Classroom. And so now the kids can watch the video about division whenever they need to. So we get to know the nature of the classroom and we adjust it accordingly.
Thank you so much. Can you explain the rationale behind eliminating multiple choice responses? So Crystal said the goal would be lessening the linguistic demands, in this case, quantity, correct? So if your possible answers were picture choices or numbers, you would not use this scaffold. Is that right?
I don't think it's necessarily a right or a wrong. I think that if that works for your students where you say, you know what, I'm going to use pictures, but I'm still going to use 4 and I know that they can handle it, then that's great. You know, obviously the goal is for them to learn language. So at some point, it's just my opinion, I would think that you would need to kind of move beyond pictures after a while. But for a brand new student, a newcomer, if you want to have 4 choices of pictures or 3 or 5, if the student feels comfortable with that and they are succeeding, then that's great. I don't think there's any hard, fast rules when it comes to students because they all come with their own unique learning styles. And that's where the equity comes in anyway. We know that there's no one size fits all. So if it's this student can use the language, but I need to eliminate some choices. But these students over here, they're not really at the language level yet. They're so new, they're still in their silent period. Let me give them a choice of pictures and see how they do with that. That's the differentiation. And that's where the equity is. And that's how they all learn.
Thank you, Jody. Nanette had a question about doing a word wall in a virtual environment, and several teachers have jumped in and given her some good suggestions. And actually saying that there are a lot of templates available online to do that. But I wanted to give you a chance to see if you had any kind of favorite tip for a virtual word wall.
I think for virtual word walls, I mean, I happen to like Google Slide or Jamboard just because it all saves in the drive. Now, my district uses the Google platform. So we have Google Suite, which also makes it, you know, very easy to use because we all have access to it, and so do the kids. They all have Google Suite. I happen to like Jamboard also in the Google Slides because it's not only about words now. You can put in a GIF, you can put in a meme, the kids can put in a piece of clip art. I mean, that's where the virtual world enables so much more creativity. It's not, because personally, I am no artist. I can't draw. I'm not good with those things, but I could find a really cool graphic to get that point across. And I can guarantee that an English language learner could do the same thing.
Perfect. Well, that just about concludes our time together today. And we actually did get to all the questions. I did want to actually say one thing. Cassie corrected me. The Padlet that she posted can actually be attributed to her colleague, Natalie Sylvester. So shout out Natalie for your creativity. Shout out Cassie for sharing it. We really do appreciate everybody attending who jumped in, trying to help each other out and really give suggestions for the benefit of the students. This is amazing. And Jody, we did have a couple of people say that this webinar has been their favorite of our webinar series. So this is, it's really resonated with a lot of people. And I just want to thank you so much for everything that you, all the time that you put into this and taking the time out of your schedule to do this today. So we will see everybody back in January. We'll open up on the 14th of January with our webinar. So look for information on that webinar coming out soon. This is how you can reach Saddleback. We are on all of your favorite social media platforms. Go ahead, don't forget, please give us a shout out on Twitter. We always love that. And thank you for all that you do, everybody. Have a great holiday season. Please enjoy your well-earned break, and we will see you in January. Have a great day, everybody.